need to move on and talk about that I wanted to mention because I thought it was absolutely quite nuts before I go into the Theo stuff. Have you guys seen this? This is pretty interesting, isn't it? Have you guys seen that? So, courtesy of Louis J. Gomez's Twitter account, it says Skanks Monday live from the Stand NYC featuring Bryan Callen. So they're going to be filming, obviously, Legion of Skanks is a pretty good podcast that they do. Obviously featured on Gas Digital and stuff, and Louis J. Gomez runs all that stuff with, what's his face? With Big J and Dave Smith. Sorry, I think his name is Dave Smith, right? I watch it from time to time. I don't have time to watch it all the time, or I don't kind of check in all the time, but whenever I do watch it, it really is kind of fun and entertaining. Again, it's quite nice to have a comedy podcast where they try to be funny. They don't sit in there pontificating about fucking COVID or talking about, cultural war issues or about trans things or trans bathrooms or flipping abortion stuff. Like, they just stick to what they know. They make funny jokes. They take the piss out of, stuff happening in the news or in culture, but not cultural hot button topics and all that sort of stuff. So it's pretty nice to watch. I'm really, really a big fan of it. But I'm surprised more so to see Bryan Callen featured on it, because if I'm not mistaken, it's pretty much a worst kept secret that Brendan doesn't get along with or doesn't like Louis J. Gomez in the slightest. Like, he really doesn't like him. I get the feeling that he doesn't like him at all. And obviously there's a reason because of that, because Louis J. kind of goes out of his way to kind of be one of the only, big comedians out there, especially on the East Coast, who goes out of the way to kind of talk about the indiscretions that Brendan get up to and all that whole crew. He's not shy to lend his opinion and share his thoughts and stuff, especially stuff that's going on with Crystalia and whatever it may be. And he's made some jokes about Brendan and his comedy and all that stuff, right? And I think the last podcast he did with Tim Dillon was pretty good as well, in that, where I think he was pretty honest and basically said, I don't even know why this, no, it was Tim said that. Maybe Tim said, I don't know. I think Tim said something like, I don't even know why Brendan even bothers. If you looked at the way he did, why would you bother doing stand-up? This is for like dregs like us, isn't it? You should be doing other amazing things. But, some really, interesting perspectives and opinion on him. But for the most part, he has he's not missing opportunity, Louis J. Gomez, to kind of stick the boot in. And from the times you hear Brendan, especially on his podcast, talk about, whenever his name's mentioned, Louis J. Gomez, you see him kind of like flinch. I mean, he doesn't really react that well when he hears his name. So there's clearly an issue there. He's made no effort to go to especially when he goes to the East Coast and does his foreign promo stuff. It's usually with the kind of the big dogs like Barstool and whatnot. He doesn't really try to go to people like this, Legion of Skanks, hang out with them, even though I think personally it'll be a far better look for him if he was to go and sit there than doing the whole Barstool sports stuff. Because, once you've done that once, especially being someone like Brendan, you probably shouldn't do it again. So if he does his next special, it'll probably be a way better way to promo your special and get some viral content out there by actually going on shows like Legion of Skanks and just opening yourself to get ripped, have a bit of a laugh, and kind of leave there with maybe some new fans. Who knows? So I'm curious to see what happens with Bryan, because this could be two things. This could be a real desperate ploy to get back into the good graces of the quote-unquote comedy community, whatever that is. I don't know what that means, who it is, where they exist. Like myself, I'm nowhere near where these guys are, and I talk about this shit. Other people talk about this shit, but I don't even know but I don't actually know if people that actually go to shows really give a fuck. Like, if he did R-word somebody or didn't R-word somebody, do they really care? The people that are paying money to go and see him perform at some fucking comedy club somewhere in the middle of America, I don't really think they do care. They just want to go there, eat their chicken fingers, have a couple of drinks, do you know what I mean? Maybe finger blast someone in the toilet and go home. That's basically it. So it shouldn't be that much of an issue, but obviously a lot of those LA guys don't really like the New York scene guys. There's a little bit of a friction, it feels like, with those two places, which makes sense because I guess ideologically they're really kind of like against each other, because you'd say LA is probably more commercially minded, and then you'd say definitely New York is more like artistic based. People that are in it for the craft, the art of it, right? There's a lot of purists that exist out there in New York. So obviously that's why there was clash in terms of the comedy stuff, because the guys over in LA are all about touring, selling merch, getting famous. There's essentially, like, think of it like Dave Attell and Burt Kreischer. You couldn't get two more different type of comedians, right? One doesn't really have social media. One is on fucking social media all the time, talking to himself on camera, sharing his pictures of his family. The other one just like smokes and does comedy. You don't really know much about him, do you know what I mean? But he's an absolute beast. So I think Dave Attell and Burt Kreischer represent the kind of two sides of the comedy world. So it'll be interesting to see how Bryan performs on it. Now, the other thing that could happen about it, so it might be a desperation attempt to kind of get back in the good graces of stuff and that stuff. Obviously to maybe rewrite the narrative in terms of him maybe being precious and being shy and being afraid of getting in front of strangers because he doesn't want to be asked the hard questions. you know, because it is quite an interesting topic to talk about. Do you know what I mean? You got accused of flipping raping somebody, especially at the peak of your career. I'd say he had like a second, third win in his career, featured in a Joker, was having that flipping offshoot show. Was it the Goldbergs? Was it the Goldbergs?
Always enjoy your content.
Oh, thank you.
A beer fund.
Thank you, my friend. I appreciate you. This is from. Why didn't it come up on my thing? Where is it? It came up on here, didn't it? Oh, why didn't I see this? But regardless, thank you to Joe Ro. Sorry, is it JRO Lizondo 23? Thank you for the $5, my friend. I appreciate you so much. Really, thank you. What was I saying? They're gonna show blah blah. Bryan Callen's gonna. Yes, I think so. This could be a desperate attempt to change things, but I also think it's an interesting topic to talk about. Like all things being equal, I still think it's an interesting topic to kind of expound on, because not everybody gets cancelled in that sort of way. So why not maybe speak about it, have a bit of a laugh, make a joke about it, and then kind of keep it moving on? Because now, for the most part, no one really has given a shit. His career's kind of landed on his feet, really. Even though it's a serious accusation, his career hasn't really suffered too much. Maybe his Hollywood career has suffered, don't get me wrong. He's probably never going to be in Hollywood again in that kind of way he was beforehand, because you know how Hollywood people are. They just don't want any negative press. It's not because morally they have any stance on it or they have any principles against it. It's more so if they also do another movie, or if there's to be another hit TV show, and they write the Variety article for it and they feature Bryan Callen on it, immediately the first thing people like that flipping writer from Los Angeles Times that was covering all the comedians, the first thing they're going to do is going to be start writing article after article, ripping into the fact that he was selected or cast in that show, which is immediately put that show into jeopardy. And if they've invested 10 mil into that show, they don't want it to die before it flipping even is aired, because one person on the cast who's not really a big role in there has got some indiscretion. So they'd rather they kind of risk avoidance. So be like, hey, you just stay there, we'll stay here. So he's got his podcast. He's doing well on that. I think I saw a YouTube channel that he's got as well, that he's trying to do his own little podcasty, vloggy type stuff. So in terms of a career, you're fine, especially if you've got your own fan base. He's got his own built fans T5K, so it's not a big deal. So I'm curious to actually hear him speak. It would be nice if he could speak about it. I doubt he will, because he probably still hopes that he could get back into Hollywood and he doesn't want to maybe stir the hornet's nest. But I would like him to actually speak about it. Like, how is it to go through something like that? How is it to go through, especially someone like him being in LA and being a close friend of Joe? He essentially got completely iced from Joe. Joe hasn't spoken to him the same way since that occasion's happened. He always used to speak about Bryan Callen being his best friend. You hardly hear him mention his name. The last appearance on Jerry Fight Companion was awkward as hell. I don't care what these guys say about it, they're still cool. It looked awkward. They look like they're not really as good friends as they were prior, because things have changed. It is what it is. So please explain, talk about it, share something, share some insights. How did it go through it? How did it for your family? How did it mean for your career? How do you feel about it? Do people change up on you? All that sort of stuff. Let's have it, but it probably won't be. And the other thing also to note, there's an issue with Luis J. Gomez. There's been several, I can't name them off the top of my head, but there's been a couple of occasions where he's got like hot button people in, like people who have gone through some stuff online, or people who maybe divide opinion, or a bit Hollywoody, or maybe even adjacent to Joe, because Lewis would desperately like to go back on Joe Rogan, but for every reason, Joe Rogan is basically ghosting him, it feels like, because he can mention all the time, but he texts him, he doesn't reply back. I'm not too sure if that's because of Joe having loyalty to Brendan, or because he just doesn't like Louis, who knows. But it's funny, or Lewis, it's funny that sometimes whenever he does interview big people, Luis J. Gomez, he has a tendency sometimes to start licking their asses. Weirdly enough, he talks a big game when they're not there, but then suddenly when they get in front of him, he starts to become like, I want to be your friend, I want to be on your podcast too, take me on tour. It starts to get a bit weird. So for all I'm saying about it being an interesting and blockbuster interview, it could end up being completely rubbish. And it could be a little bit of it could end up flattering to deceive, because none of these guys want to upset somebody that's so close to flipping Joe. Do you know what I mean? And if there's one thing that we know about these guys, Joe Rogan is essentially Gandhi. Do you know what I mean? That you cannot upset that guy. He's basically the podcast version of Steve Jobs when he was alive. Because a lot of people don't remember this, but when Steve Jobs was alive, the amount of acolytes he had was probably even worse than Elon. I know Elon has a lot of really strange reply guys, or people that don't see anything wrong in what he does, but the Steve Jobs kind of fanboys were on another level when he was around. And he didn't really get to enjoy the fruits of the social media era as it is now, but we're seeing it in real time with Joe Rogan for sure. These guys, especially in the industry. You know what's funny, actually? Forget that. Let me rewind it. You know what's really interesting about Joe Rogan? I'm just thinking about it now. There's more fanboys of him that aren't his listeners that are in the industry. No, sorry. He has more fanboys in the industry than actually listeners. You know, I mentioned Elon Musk. Like, Elon Musk has fanboys and reply guys, but they're usually, guys who wish they could be Elon, right? Geeks and nerds and stuff who are socially awkward and would love to kind of live through him. They kind of live vicariously through him, which makes sense. But Joe seems to have a lot more people ready to lick his ass who are like in the industry. People have their own careers, they're grown ups, they have wives and stuff, they have money, and they still are like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's really interesting that. Whereas the fans, I feel like, are just fans. They consume his podcast, they watch his shows, but they're not like, they're not flipping, they're not fanboys, they're not standing. Do you know what I mean? They don't make excuses for him. Like, if he says dumb stuff, they say, yeah, they'll call him out, he said dumb stuff. But it's not like a one-way street of just like sucking him off and whatnot. But anyway, regardless, Leading the Skanks with Bryan Callen is happening next Monday on the 12th. You can watch it, of course, live if you want to on Gas Digital. I think it comes out later, a couple of days later, I think, or maybe 3. I'm not too sure how it works out, but for sure we'll see some clips on it. Let's see how it goes. Let's see how it happens, and hopefully it will be fun.